Today, we're exploring a question that's keeping economists, policymakers, and workers awake at night. Is the next recession going to be fundamentally different from anything we've experienced before? With recession probability estimates ranging from 20% to 75% for 2025, we're not just asking if a downturn is coming. We're examining how AI displacement, demographic shifts, deglobalization, and persistent inflation could create an entirely new category of economic crisis.
Sam, we're potentially facing what I call a structural recession, one driven not by traditional business cycles, but by permanent shifts in how our economy functions. Unlike 2008, which was about financial excess, or 2020, which was a pandemic shock, this would be about the collision of multiple long-term trends that are reshaping the foundation of work, trade, and demographic structures.
The numbers are stark. We're seeing what I call the white-collar recession already beginning. IBM estimates AI could replace 7,800 HR jobs alone. Goldman Sachs has quietly reduced junior analyst hiring, and 40% of employers anticipate workforce reductions where AI can automate tasks. This isn't your grandfather's recession where manufacturing jobs disappeared. This is cognitive work, the jobs we thought were safe vanishing in real time.
Simultaneously, we're witnessing the unwinding of 40 years of globalization. Trump's tariffs could create an effective $430 billion tax hike, 1.4% of GDP. But unlike previous trade wars, we're seeing permanent supply chain regionalization. Companies aren't just waiting this out, they're fundamentally restructuring global production networks. This isn't temporary disruption, it's permanent reorganization.
And underneath all of this is a demographic time bomb that most economists are underestimating. The U.S. labor force participation rate has fallen from 66% in 2007 to 62.8% today. 79% of that decline is pure demographics. Japan is already seeing record bankruptcies from labor shortages. We're not just facing a recession, we're facing a labor scarcity economy that will persist for decades.
Dr. Chen, let's start with the baseline question. How likely is a recession in 2025, and what factors are driving these predictions?
The probability estimates are all over the map, which itself tells a story. JP Morgan recently reduced their recession probability from 60% to 40%, while the New York Fed's yield curve model shows 75% probability. But here's what's different. Traditional recession indicators are breaking down. GDP contracted 0.3% in Q1 2025, yet corporate profits remain robust. We're seeing disconnects between traditional metrics that suggest we're already in uncharted territory.
The employment data is particularly telling. We're seeing what economists call jobless prosperity. Companies are maintaining revenue growth while reducing headcount through AI implementation. Since ChatGPT's debut, only 8.7% of companies formally use AI for production, but that's accelerating rapidly. During economic pressure, automation adoption historically speeds up. We could see a decade of AI adoption compressed into 2 years.
The trade dimension adds another layer of complexity. We're not just dealing with tariffs, we're seeing systematic decoupling. China's share of U.S. imports fell from 22% to 16% between 2017 and 2022. But unlike historical trade wars, this involves technology, rare earth minerals, and critical supply chains. Companies are choosing sides in ways that create permanent economic fragmentation.
Sarah, you mentioned the white-collar recession. Walk us through how AI displacement is creating a fundamentally different type of economic downturn.
This is unprecedented because it's targeting high-skill, high-wage jobs that were supposed to be automation-proof. Market research analysts face 53% task automation risk, sales representatives 67%. But their managers, only 9% and 21% respectively. We're seeing entry-level professional roles, the traditional pathway to middle-class careers, simply disappearing. Goldman Sachs projects 300 million full-time jobs globally could be exposed to automation.
What makes this particularly dangerous is the timing. Historically, recessions eliminated manufacturing jobs, but those workers could retrain for service sector roles. Now we're potentially eliminating knowledge work while demographic trends reduce the overall labor force. We could see simultaneous labor shortages in some sectors and mass unemployment in others, a barbell economy that traditional macroeconomic tools can't address.
The demographic component is being massively underestimated. By 2030, 994 million people globally will be over 65. That's 1.6 billion by 2050. In the US, workers 55 plus are the fastest growing segment, yet their labor force participation plateaus. Meanwhile, prime age participation continues declining. We're heading into a world where there literally aren't enough workers, even as AI eliminates jobs. It's economically paradoxical.
Dr. Vasquez, how is deglobalization changing the fundamental structure of recessions? Are we looking at regional rather than global downturns?
Exactly, the concept of synchronized global recessions may be ending. We're seeing the emergence of economic blocs that will experience different recession patterns. The US-China trade war isn't just about tariffs, it's creating parallel economic systems. China is sourcing agricultural products from third countries to avoid US exports. American companies are building entirely separate supply chains for Chinese versus Western markets.
This has profound implications for monetary policy. Central banks coordinated responses in 2008 and 2020. But if economic blocs are decoupling, we might see divergent policy responses that actually amplify regional differences. A US recession might not automatically spread to China the way it would have in 2008. But it also means Chinese stimulus won't help American workers the way it did during the Great Recession.
The supply chain regionalization is already creating different labor market dynamics. Vietnam and Mexico are seeing massive manufacturing investment as companies diversify away from China. But these new supply chains are being built with AI-enabled automation from day one. We're not just moving jobs geographically, we're eliminating them in the process of moving them.
Marcus, you mentioned demographic time bombs. How do aging populations change the nature of economic downturns?
Traditional recessions assume a large working-age population that can be quickly redeployed when demand returns, but we're heading into permanent labor scarcity. Japan is already there. 66% of companies report serious labor shortage impacts, with bankruptcies from worker shortages up 32% in 2024. In the US, about a third of some workforces will retire in the next decade. This fundamentally changes recession dynamics.
This creates what economists call supply-constrained recessions. Instead of excess capacity and unemployment, we might see sectors unable to restart quickly because there simply aren't enough workers. Recovery becomes constrained not by demand or capital, but by human resources. It's a complete inversion of traditional recession patterns where unemployment provided a ready workforce for recovery.
Immigration historically helped address labor shortages, but political trends are moving against this solution exactly when it's most needed. The aging economies that most need workers, US, EU, Japan, are implementing more restrictive immigration policies. Meanwhile, traditional source countries are experiencing their own demographic transitions and economic development, reducing immigration pressure.
Let's talk about inflation in this context. How does persistent inflation change recession dynamics compared to the deflationary pressures we've historically seen?
This is where it gets really complex. Typically, recessions are disinflationary, demand falls, prices fall, the Fed cuts rates to stimulate. But we're potentially facing stagflationary recession, economic contraction with persistent inflation. Tariffs are inherently inflationary. Labor shortages push wages up. Deglobalization reduces efficiency. Climate change increases commodity costs. These are all structural inflationary forces that don't disappear during recessions.
AI adds a weird twist to this. While AI might eliminate jobs, creating deflationary pressure on wages, it requires massive energy infrastructure that's inherently inflationary. Data centers now consume more electricity than entire countries. The AI boom is driving energy demand precisely when climate policies are constraining supply. So we get deflationary labor effects but inflationary energy effects.
Regionalized supply chains are also inherently less efficient and more expensive than global ones. The era of cheap goods produced in low-cost countries and shipped globally is ending. Even without tariffs, companies are prioritizing supply chain resilience over cost optimization. This creates permanent inflationary pressure that won't ease during recessions the way global supply chain efficiencies did.
How does all this affect different demographics? Are we looking at a recession that hits various groups in completely new ways?
The distributional effects are unprecedented. Historically, blue-collar workers bore the brunt of recessions. This time, college-educated, white-collar professionals are most at risk from AI displacement. Meanwhile, physically demanding jobs, elder care, construction, food service, face labor shortages and wage growth. We could see the first recession where education becomes a liability rather than protection.
Age dynamics are inverting too. Older workers are staying in the workforce longer. 19% of adults 65 plus are employed today versus 11% in 1987. But younger workers face an increasingly AI-automated job market. Entry-level positions that traditionally provided career pathways are disappearing. We might see a recession where older workers are more economically secure than younger ones.
Geographic inequality will be extreme. Regions that successfully attract reshored manufacturing or become AI hubs will prosper. But areas dependent on traditional industries or without tech infrastructure could face permanent decline. Unlike previous recessions where recovery was broadly distributed, this one could create permanent winners and losers based on industrial transformation.
What about policy responses? Do traditional fiscal and monetary tools even work in this new paradigm?
Traditional tools are losing effectiveness. Monetary policy assumes that lower interest rates stimulate borrowing and investment. But if companies are investing in automation to eliminate workers rather than expand production, rate cuts might accelerate job displacement rather than create employment. It's a complete reversal of traditional monetary transmission mechanisms.
Fiscal policy faces similar challenges. Infrastructure spending typically creates jobs, but AI-enabled construction uses fewer workers. Direct cash transfers might be more effective than traditional job creation programs, but that requires political systems to accept that full employment might no longer be achievable or even desirable. It's a fundamental rethinking of economic policy goals.
International coordination becomes nearly impossible in a deglobalized world. The Plaza Accord of 1985 or the coordinated response to 2008 required shared economic interests. But if major economies are actively trying to reduce interdependence, coordinated stimulus or currency management becomes politically unacceptable. Each bloc will prioritize domestic concerns over global stability.
Looking ahead, what should people expect? How should individuals, businesses, and governments prepare for this fundamentally different type of economic downturn?
For individuals, the old playbook is obsolete. Get more education won't protect you if AI can do knowledge work. Focus on developing uniquely human skills, emotional intelligence, creativity, complex problem solving. Consider careers in sectors with demographic tailwinds like eldercare or skilled trades. Most importantly, develop multiple income streams and build financial resilience for a more volatile career landscape.
Businesses need to build for resilience, not just efficiency. Diversify supply chains across multiple regions, not just multiple suppliers in one region. Invest in automation, but also in retraining existing workers. Consider how your business model works in a world of higher input costs but lower labor costs. The companies that thrive will be those that can navigate both AI displacement and supply chain regionalization.
Governments need comprehensive workforce transition strategies. This isn't just about unemployment insurance. It's about restructuring entire education systems, creating portable benefits for gig workers, and possibly implementing universal basic income pilots. Most importantly, immigration policy must align with economic reality. Countries that attract working-age talent will have enormous advantages.
We need new economic frameworks entirely. GDP growth in a world of labor scarcity and AI productivity means different things. We might need metrics focused on human flourishing rather than just production. Central banks might need to target employment distribution, not just aggregate employment. It's not just a recession, it's an economic system transition.
What gives you hope, or at least optimism, about navigating this transition?
AI eliminates jobs, but it also eliminates drudgery. If we can figure out the transition, we might create a world where humans focus on uniquely meaningful work, creativity, care, complex problem solving. The challenge is managing the transition equitably, but the destination could be a more human-centered economy than we've ever had.
Demographic changes happen slowly, which gives us time to adapt. We can see labor shortages coming decades in advance. Societies that plan for aging, investing in care infrastructure, immigration systems, and age-friendly workplaces will turn demographic challenges into competitive advantages. It's predictable, which makes it manageable.
Regionalization might make supply chains less efficient, but more resilient and sustainable. Shorter supply chains mean lower carbon footprints, stronger local economies, and less vulnerability to global shocks. If we can manage the transition costs, we might build more stable and equitable economic systems than the hyper-optimized global networks we're leaving behind.
Every major economic transition creates winners and losers, but also new possibilities. The Industrial Revolution was devastating for agricultural workers, but created unprecedented prosperity. The digital revolution eliminated many jobs but created entirely new industries. This AI and demographic transition will be similarly disruptive, but it could also solve problems we've struggled with for decades: productivity, sustainability, human potential.
Dr. Chen, Sarah, Dr. Vasquez, Marcus, thank you for this crucial conversation. You've shown us that the next recession won't just be another economic downturn, it's the labor pains of a new economic era. Understanding these structural changes now is the difference between being prepared and being overwhelmed by forces that seem unpredictable but are actually quite foreseeable. This episode was brought to you by Unstruct AI, where we explore the human cost of systemic change. Today, we've seen how technological, demographic, and geopolitical forces are converging to create not just a different recession, but a fundamentally different economic reality. The question isn't whether change is coming, it's whether we'll shape it or let it shape us.